So this week I wanted to talk about an anime slash manhwa that everyone's really been clamoring for, everyone's really hyped for when it was first announced, which is Solo Leveling. So when I first heard of Solo Leveling, I didn't really know what to expect from it, mostly just because I actually had no idea what it was about. I kind of just saw the trailer, and to me it just seemed like sort of a power fantasy, which it ultimately is, but I didn't really know much about it. So when I heard it was being released as winter season, I decided to check it out. And from the first episode, I just did not get what was good about the manhwa or about Solo Leveling. Let me preface this by saying I am a hater. I do like to hate or at least be very critical of things that are popular just because I don't know, I was just born that way. I was a very pessimistic child. Maybe I should go to therapy to discuss these things. But nevertheless, I'm going to talk about Solo Leveling and why I just kind of didn't like it for the first episode. So upon the first episode, it pretty much does everything that I dislike in anime, which, to be fair, is mostly what happens in like isekais, which is when a black-haired self-insert character who has pretty much zero personality is put into a world and they're pretty much made OP, giving no stakes in the story whatsoever. And isekais are the ones that are mostly responsible for this type of genre, which is why isekai is not my favorite genre. I kind of hate it. And isekai is mostly the one that kind of pushes this whole narrative. Obviously there's good isekais. I appreciate a good isekai, especially one that's kind of weird and like kind of goes out of bounds with what a normal isekai is. But I do not like the self-insert power fantasy OP character that just has some like insta death ability or just something that can obliterate the enemy all in one go. To me, that's very boring. It's not good storytelling, and generally, it's just dumb. So when I saw the first episode and I generally learned the plot of Solo Leveling, I was thinking that this is just going to be another self-insert power fantasy. If you don't know what Solo Leveling is, this is your first introduction to it, let me give you just a quick rundown of the plot. I'm going to try to avoid spoilers as much as possible just because I know people don't like them, but I feel like I might have to say some things in order to get my points across. But nevertheless, I'm going to try my best to make sure that I don't spoil anything. So Solo Leveling follows our main character, Sung Jin Woo, who is an E-rank hunter in this world, specifically in Korea. In this world, there are hunters and there's various guilds that hunters join, and they essentially go on these raids, which are essentially these portals open up, these like bright blue portals open up anywhere in the city, and these guilds go and they clear this dungeon. It's essentially a dungeon. They clear it out, they beat any of the boss monsters that are there, they take down the boss, they kind of reap the rewards. There's like these mana crystals that they collect or these essence stones that they collect from the monsters, and pretty much they can sell those for money. And the dungeons are separated based off of rank. So there's a few ranks. They're pretty much rank S through E, so S, A, B, C, D, and E. And our main character, Sung Jin Woo, is an E rank hunter. But he's also the weakest E-rank hunter that's probably ever existed ever. In doing so, he only takes E-rank missions because that's pretty much the only thing he'll probably survive. And he struggles to survive even in these low-level missions. So much so that some of the characters are comforted by his presence because it means that if he is here, this dungeon is so easy that he'll survive. And of course, things happen and eventually he's able to level up in this world. Pretty much level up his own power, very much through like a video game setting. Now here's the thing, in this world, hunters gain their power at some point, it's called an awakening, and they pretty much only stay at that power level. They never gain any more, they never gain any less. They just kind of stick to where they are, so and then they're classified into a rank. So let's say like if you're really strong, then you go into S rank or A rank. But if you're weak, you go into like C or D or E, right? And so you can understand how Sung Jin Woo having this ability to level up in this world pretty much seems unfair to the rest of the people who actually figure out that he can do this sort of thing. So that's a little bit of the plot. And so immediately, I just wasn't a fan of where this would probably be going. And so after the first episode, I saw the first episode, I was just not impressed by anything I was seeing. I really did not like the direction it was going. It just didn't seem interesting to me. I thought it was just going to be boring. I did not understand the hype. Before I hate on anything though, I make sure that I know what I am hating on. And by doing that, I need to have a firm knowledge of the content of the plot of everything this thing has to offer before I can make a concrete opinion. I'm not going to hate on something just off of one episode or even one chapter, 50 chapters. So I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to read Solo Leveling. I'm going to read it completely through and I'm going to see if it's even worth watching the anime. Because reading, I can get through that pretty quickly and I can discover if I like something or not. Watching something is a bit more of a time commitment. And I'm an adult, I don't have that much time anymore. I try to watch as many things as possible, but nevertheless, some things escape me. So when I started reading Solo Leveling, I I was probably around 40, 45 chapters in, and I still wasn't getting why people like this manhwa so much. It really just was not clicking in my head, because it pretty much solidified everything I thought about Solo Leveling, which it is just the self-insert power fantasy of this guy who gets so strong. Essentially, any battle he partakes in kind of has no stakes. But then I kept reading, because again, I'm not gonna hate on something until I know exactly what I'm dealing with. And I'm glad I did. It kind of reminded me of like that one meme, right? Where the person's like digging for diamonds, and then before they hit the diamonds, they just turn back. Not me. I decided I was gonna stick with it, and then I hit the diamonds. And it was around chapter 53, I think, that sort of flipped the switch in my brain. Because up until that point, you know, our main protagonist, Sung Jin Woo, he is pretty much a goody two-shoes despite some of the events that occur up until that point. But what happens in chapter 53 just kind of flipped a switch for me for some reason that made me a lot more interested. So then I just kept going, and then I kept reading, and then at a certain point I just really couldn't stop reading, because I just found myself enjoying the manhwa like a lot. And I took some time to really wonder why that is. I rarely kind of change my opinion on things, but I'm glad I do in these certain cases. And so without going into spoilers, I want to just say that kind of how the title of this episode is called, it is good for all the wrong reasons. And so all the wrong reasons are pretty much everything I just described, right? It's a power fantasy. Every battle doesn't feel like there's stakes. The self-insert sort of generic protagonist. The side characters aren't so great. I like them, but they lack a lot of depth, and that's mostly because it's so focused on Sung Jin Woo, right, and his story and his narrative. But shout out to the chairman, Go Gun Hee, I believe. I have his name up here because these Korean names are really hard for me to pronounce. But yeah, Go Gun Hee, he was probably my favorite side character of the whole thing. Obviously, best girl, Cha Hae-in. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I'm so sorry if I butchered that. She was awesome. I liked her a lot. And Baek Kyung-hoo, again, I'm probably butchering that. But I really like those characters because they seem to have like the most personality of all the characters. And so when I continue reading it, something clicked in my head. And that is that Solo Leveling is just so unapologetically what it is that I can't help but respect it and just like it, because it just goes all in. To give you like a comparison, it is kind of like an RPG character where you just max out one stat and then you're just like, yep, that's what I'm gonna go with. And that's essentially what Solo Leveling is. It just maxes out the power fantasy stat and really just unashamedly just is like the peak power fantasy. At a certain point, I stopped caring that some of these battles had no stakes and how strong Sung Jin Woo gets, which gets pretty ridiculous, and you should read it because it's really good. And I just found myself getting more interested. Like I felt like a little kid again, where I'm just like, no way can he get stronger. There's like, how can he get stronger after this, right? And then he just keeps getting stronger, and then he just keeps going, and he keeps going, and it just doesn't stop. It just doesn't stop, and it makes me very happy that it doesn't stop. I feel like other animes, mangas, manhwas, whatever you call it, would eventually hit a turning point where he would sort of hit a wall, right? And then there's like sort of a conflict that would happen. And then from there, he would have like this character growth, right? Which he does have, I will admit. Though the plot, I will say, is one of the weaker aspects of Solo Leveling. Again, it has a lot of flaws, but I almost don't care, because it just does what it does so well. It's beautifully illustrated. Like every single panel, everything that's drawn is pretty much drawn to like its most maximum potential, and that's what I love about it. It's just so beautiful, and I believe that the anime can do a good job of it. Like so far, these first few episodes have been doing a pretty solid job in at least the animation department. I don't think it'll ever reach the manhwa level quality of drawing, but it's kind of hard to do that because the quality is so high. And then on top of that, like Sung Jin Woo, even though I will say as a protagonist he's pretty weak, I can't help but root for the guy because he's just unapologetically who he is. It's like if someone came to me and told me like, hey, I'm gonna tell you everything I know about trains, and then I don't care about trains. I probably don't even like trains that much. But because this person so passionately told me like this 4-hour history lesson on like steam engines or something, that I am just engrossed with it. And I think that's what it is. When you read Solo Leveling, you kind of understand that this is just like a passion project almost. And then that's kind of just what it is. Because it's just so focused on telling me one aspect of the story, and it does it really well, the other weaknesses of the story just kind of fall apart and I stop noticing them. The action is great. It's probably one of the best illustrated action manhwas, or mangas for that matter, that I've seen in a long time, which again, illustrated beautifully. And because Solo Leveling focuses on like the action and the power scaling and just kind of going beyond the next step, going beyond what we think is already the most powerful thing that could possibly exist, and then just going beyond that just makes me feel like a kid again. It almost felt like I was watching DBZ and seeing Goku go Super Saiyan 3 for the first time, except imagine if he goes Super Saiyan 4, and then he goes Super Saiyan 5, but then he goes Super Saiyan 6, and then eventually he hits Super Saiyan 100, and it's like that one image we all know. And so I think it's like that aspect that makes it really popular. That being said, I am going to go to a bit of criticism, because there are some things I just wasn't a fan of. And if you don't want to hear those, because I'm not going to get into spoilers, but I'm going to pretty much detail some plot things that happen. Not necessarily exactly what happens, but just generally what happens. So if you don't, you can leave the video now or skip to this timestamp. I'll figure it out later. Like I mentioned earlier, the side characters are the weakest part. Mostly because at a certain point, they just become useless. They are rendered obsolete at a certain point when Sung Jin Woo gets so strong that he can pretty much handle anything by himself. He can handle it solo. Ha, see what I did there? But yeah, and so all these characters that I actually kind of liked and were interested in, they just get shoved to the sidelines, because essentially, why are they even there when Sung Jin Woo can pretty much do everything? So that to me was a bit of a negative, because I like seeing these characters and their OPness, right? Like, he's not the only OP person in this world. There's other OPS ranked hunters. But because he's so strong and he can handle everything, they kind of get sidelined and they essentially have nothing to do. That's obviously something that happens later in the manhwa. It's not something that like occurs early on, but it was like a negative that I thought. The other two was the overall just story. Again, I pretty much had a feeling of what the system was and why and how he got his powers. But again, you don't read Solo Leveling for the plot. I'm glad that it does have a plot, which is more than I can say about other things that are similar, where they kind of lack a plot. At least Solo Leveling does have a structure that it follows so that it can end at a certain point. I'm really glad they didn't prolong this. I think there were some issues as to why it had to end pretty early, but otherwise I'm glad it did and it didn't drag out too long, because everybody knows how generally the story goes in these power fantasies. There's only so much you can do before people get tired of like the gimmick and the premise, and so I'm really glad that it ended at some point. And though the plot to me was pretty weak, I think it actually did a serviceable job. Again, a plot doesn't have to be like Attack on Titan levels of intricate where everything has connected to everything and then everyone has to do everything, and then this person is actually responsible for this and that person is responsible for that, and oh, but this guy is actually responsible for, it doesn't have to be that. It could just be a simple story, and that's pretty much what Solo Leveling is, kind of. It's simple in the beginning, then it gets a little bit more complicated to the point where I don't think I actually followed it that closely or correctly. I might have to reread it again, which I don't mind because it's so good. But otherwise, I think that for what it is, the plot is just fine. It's serviceable. I don't need anything more than what it is. And again, I think Sung Jin Woo as a character is kind of weak. But again, I just don't care. This manhwa, Solo Leveling, just resets my brain to caveman times. It just makes me think unga bunga unga. Ooh, my god, guy gets stronger. Boom bonk. Like that is what it does to my brain. And that's good. It's really easy to read. You can fly by through it really quickly. And honestly, you should just give it a chance if you like that kind of thing. And even if you don't, I would give it a chance because it does it pretty well. Again, I went into Solo Leveling actively wanting to hate it. But after finishing it, it pretty much became one of my favorite written pieces, at least. Mostly just because it is just fun. And I think if I can explain it in one word, that's what Solo Leveling is. It's just fun. Actually, it's also hype. It's fun and hype. 2 words I have to describe it. And that's really all I want you to take from this video, is because I can already tell that there's going to be people that watch this and think, oh my god, it's so boring. It's just another power fantasy, aka what I would have said if I was, I just saw the first episode and that's it. So you just have to accept Solo Leveling for what it is. I can tell if people watch the first 2 episodes or even 3 episodes of Solo Leveling, they might not like it because it is pretty generic. They'd be like, oh, it's just another power fantasy self-insert black hair protagonist. It's going to be so boring. He's going to get stronger. He's going to be so OP. It doesn't matter. The story doesn't matter. Which is what I would have said if I didn't read it. But I did, so I changed my mind. So please, if you do watch it, just accept it for what it is. It is just fun and hype, like I mentioned before. Go into it with, I would say, low expectations, honestly. don't try to judge it on other like criteria, because it really isn't trying to be something it's not. It is what it is. And I think that's just the thing I love about solo leveling. It's not trying to be anything it's not. It is what it is, and that's it. It's fun and hype. That's pretty much all I have to say on the matter. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like, subscribe. I can't tell you what to do. You have to do that on your own. But I would say give solo leveling a chance. Watch the anime. I'm going to actually watch it because I'm actually really hyped for it now. I would definitely read the manhwa. It goes by really fast. And that's pretty much it. Peace.